Shalom and greetings from the rolling hills of Judea, just east of the famous East Jerusalem, which is going to be our subject today, in what some like to call the West Bank. I have settled here, which makes me a West Bank settler, officially on paper, and I'm happy about that. So, the big news going on for the last few weeks and is about the East Jerusalem and specifically the Sheikh Jarrah, what now is called the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. When I was here in '96, I had never heard that name. I was very close to it. I was a few blocks away from it. I never went there, but it was called Shimon HaTzadik. Shimon HaTzadik was a famous Jewish sage that lived at the time of Alexander the Great. Legend has it that he greeted Alexander the Great when he came and took over Jerusalem. So what's going on? There's a group of Arab squatters that are living in homes that belong to Jews and or Jewish organizations. And some of the houses have been reclaimed by Jews, and then they get sold to an actual person who wants to live there, or rented to a person who wants to live there. In this case, there's a man named Tal Yeshayev, which I'm doing my best with the pronunciation of his name. Jewish guy who had his car burnt 9 times. Then his house was burnt down 2 weeks ago on Shabbat. Fortunately, he and his family were not there. The Molotov cocktail, I believe it was thrown into the baby's room and burnt the crib first, and then the rest of the house. And there was, no real police presence in the area. There were an MK, known as a far right MK, whatever that means, Itamar Ben-Gvir from the Otzma Yehudit party, which is part of a larger faction of parties called Religious Zionism. So he went down and set up a parliamentary office because there's some rule that if a member of Knesset goes somewhere, he has to be provided some sort of protection. I think is particular if he sets up an office. Jerusalem is recognized by Israel as belonging, all of it as belonging to Israel. So there's no real, and it's the capital. So there's no real reason why you could not set up an office in eastern Jerusalem in this particular neighborhood. There are even regular government offices nearby, like Bituach Leumi, I think was about 200 meters away. You have to understand that the Minister of Internal Security, who's in charge of the police, is extremely left-wing, and really would like to see Ben-Gvir get killed. That's been a number of issues so far. So he, is not really, he'll do whatever it can to thwart him. So MK Ben-Gvir goes down to Sheikh Jarrah, sets up an office on the property of the man who whose house was burnt down. Another part of this you have to know is that Israeli members of Knesset have immunity, or are supposed to have immunity, which means they can pretty much go anywhere they want to. Maybe some closed military zones not, but other than that, any place that's basically a regular person. We don't have rights here, so a regular person can be stopped and told you're not allowed to go over there. But a member of Knesset is not supposed to be. Since this whole office thing, by the way, his office is just a tent with a banner with his name, maybe a couple tents now, and some plastic chairs, outdoor chairs. So since then, Ben-Gvir has been beaten up by the police, gone to the hospital. He collapsed and was unconscious after being beaten by the police. Went back to the Knesset with a bandage wrapped around his head. Since then, he has been setting up his office every day. There have been days where they won't let him in, or they won't let his staff in. Now, his staff is not covered by the immunity, so the police can say, "Oh, you're just not allowed to go over there." Even though it's private property, and the owner wants him to, although Arud Sheva, even though it is supposed to be a considered a right wing news organization, they said that he was, I believe it was them. He said that they said that he was evicted by the police, Ben-Gvir, when they beat him up. He was being evicted because he was trespassing on private property of the guy whose house was burnt down, who wants him there. But he was illegally on private property. I think was the way they stated it. So whatever that's supposed to mean, I have no idea. Um, Bennett, after after all this happened, and there have been a number of cases of the Arabs, of course, attacking the Jews, and the Jews throwing stuff back and everything. The Bennett, the prime minister, said the Israel police is increasing the level of security, and it will take care of securing all the residents of the city. But the Yushayev family, okay, uh, now, this increasing level of security, only happened because Ben-Gvir showed up. Why do I say that? Somebody criticized me on Facebook for saying that. Is that the guy's car was burnt 9 times. The last time, a few days before his home was set on fire, and nobody had been arrested. There was no police, watching out, like catching the guys when they went to try and burn the house. Even if they had burnt the house and there was a police that caught them at the time, oopsie, but I mean, you didn't even have that. The After Ben-Gvir showed up, after he started having his placing his office there and being there every day, the police did start showing up, but it was only because they really can't stand him. In particular, like I said, the Minister of Security, Internal Security, Bennett, of course, is trying to keep together a coalition that includes Arab parties, includes all of the left, from the most extreme left, including this Omar Bar-Lev, Internal Security Minister. Um, that's his coalition, they say he's the right-wing party, but the truth is he needs the government more than anybody else. He wants to be prime minister, and as soon as he's gone, like half of his voters at least feel that he betrayed them after the election by making this coalition agreement in the first place. His party only had 6 seats in this Knesset. It's not very likely that he will get reelected, that his party will even make it into Knesset in the next round of elections, whenever they may be. So he really has no choice but to go along with whatever the other members of his coalition say. There are parties and left-wing parties, parties like Meretz, Labor, and then of course the Arab Party Ra'am. Um, some background on this is that in 1967, of course, Israel took over uh, the eastern took over the eastern half of Jerusalem, which includes the Old City. All of what was classically Jerusalem was in Jordanian hands from 1948 to 1967. Now, almost nobody recognized that and the UN did not recognize Jordan's occupation of that land. It was not that there was another Arab state and they said, oh, you have to form this other Arab state. It was that really there was a no man's land. So even though they don't recognize it's no man's land as far as it was ownerless. The Jews really had a right to it in as far as the mandate was supposed to turn over to them, but even barring that, there was no other state to give it to. There was no other state formed. The Arab state that they could have formed in the West Bank was not formed. It was Jordan. Jordan owned it, and nobody really complained about that. Um, the When the PLO formed in 1964, 3 years before the uh, Six Day War, they specifically excluded the territories that were owned by Jordan, which is the West Bank, and Egypt, which was Gaza. Um, okay, so Israel takes over the land, and they have to decide what to do with the people living there. Now, Israel wanted to give it back to Jordan because they felt that Jordan would keep control over the Arab citizens. They're literally, as we discussed before, literal Jordanian citizens. They gave everybody's citizenship. Um, so Israel felt that Jordan would do the best job of keeping track of it. They had begged Jordan not to get involved in the 6 Day War to begin with, and Jordan felt like they were going to miss out if they did not support the Arab cause and attack Israel during that war. That's how they wound up losing all the territory. If they stayed out of it, the Jerusalem would be still in Jordanian hands, and I of course would not be living here because I have no desire to try and live in Jordan, even if it is the land of Israel. Israel decides not to evict anybody. Israel blocked the bridges and turned all the Arabs who were fleeing to the eastern side of the Jordan River, they turned them back. They told the city of Jerusalem, the Arabs in charge of it, turned over, like basically handed the keys of the city over to the Israeli army and said, we're ready to go, figuring they were going to be evicted. Israel said, no, everybody stay where you are. And Moshe Dayan, in particular, said, no, we don't want to have a Vatican. He was very anti-religious. We don't want to have a Vatican. Everybody stay where you are. You can keep the Temple Mount. This is how we got in trouble with the Temple Mount in the first place, why it's run by the Jordanian Waqf, Jordanian Muslim Religious Association, is because Moshe Dayan said, no, we're leaving everybody where they are. However, they did start allowing Jews to move into the area. So in the decisions after 1967, they decided not to evict any Arabs from their houses. In 1948, they had evicted people. However, after 1948, they had evicted people. However, they decided not to evict anybody. They also recognized any ownership of land by now Jordanian citizens, by anybody really, because it also includes like the Greek Orthodox Church is, I think, the biggest landowner in Jerusalem. Anything that was owned, that was registered as owned in the any of the conquered territories, would stay under that, would stay belonging to those people, and not just Jews. And specifically, that this doesn't really even pertain to Jews. So if you owned a piece of land, which is how you get these private ownership claims in the West Bank, somebody says, "I own a piece of that land," and sometimes they can produce a deed, and the Israeli courts will force people to tear down houses and everything because some guy, what is it, 55 years later, almost now, comes forward and says, "I have a deed to that, to a meter, a square meter, a square foot in your house. Therefore, you got to tear the whole house down." The Israeli courts have recognized that has happened. So the that applies to land that was transferred ownership. They even recognize if the Jordanian government transferred land, often they would do this as a benefit to somebody who would help them out or whatever, supported them. So they say, "Yeah, we got this, we have some land here. It was it wasn't that densely populated, so like, okay, so we'll give you whatever land this is." The Jordanians, between the wars, between 1948 and 1967, had built homes in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, and but they had built it on privately owned Jewish land. They had not transferred the ownership. They never gave the tenants ownership to the properties. They just put them there to live. When Israel took back over, then it doesn't belong to the tenants. The owners, there were two Jewish organizations that owned it. They tried to get their land back, and it's been a decades-long fight to evict them. Now, what Israel said was, if you pay rent, then an Arab cannot be evicted from a house in any of the conquered territory, as long as he continues to live there or his descendants do. Doesn't matter how long it goes. The courts upheld this. They will not kick somebody out. However, if they leave, they can kick them out, or if they refuse to pay rent. So my understanding is originally they started paying rent, but the PA convinced them that it should not they should not recognize the rule of Israel over Jerusalem at all, and therefore should stop paying rent. So for decades now, at least since the 90s, they have these people have not paid any rent to the Jewish owners of the property. Now, in addition to that, the both from Arabs selling and from I believe it's just Arab selling. I don't know if and from reclaimed from Arab selling and from reclaimed property. So Jews have moved into that neighborhood. There are a few brave souls who will pick up and move to those neighborhoods. The land is bought. If it was privately held by a not by an Arab, they the there are organizations that will pay a premium on that on those properties. Now, the owners risk death because the Palestinian Authority has made it a capital crime to sell property to Jews, but there are still those who will do it. Will take their money, the found money, and get out of the way, leave the country, whatever, or put up enough of a public fuss that it looks like, oh, somehow I got cheated, but you know whatever. Um, and a few enterprising, pioneering souls will move into these properties, which is what happened with the Talia Yeshayev case. Talia Yeshayev owns the property. Um, and there's another case that is going on at the same time that has been kind of conflated in the media, um, and by all the Arab activists on the ground, is there is another family that is facing eviction because they have not paid rent. They refuse to pay rent. Had they paid rent, or if they now turned around and said we will pay rent, they would not be evicted from the house. But it is owned by Yosef. His last name is Yosef. Yonatan, I believe it is Yosef. Um, who is an activist in this area and bought the property and is trying to evict the Salam family. That case has been going through court, and as the courts love to, I think it's probably common in all jurisdictions, but more so I think in Israel. They give a decision, then later they say, "Oh, wait a minute, we need to make another decision." So Israel this past week froze the eviction, which in my opinion is the worst mistake. There's some sort of appeal going on. I have no idea. I could not find information on what the appeal is about. Even on the Supreme Court's own webpage, is said that hey, we're holding off until we give a new come to another decision. But they uh, they prolong this. They push this off, which makes both sides just sit there and ferment longer and longer. Now, you should remember, and it's been true, and all the media has talked about this. This is what led uh, to the May flare up with Hamas. Uh, there was an issue over evictions in Sheikh Jarrah. It was the same situation. Ben-Gvir had set up an office there to protect the Jewish residents there who do not get police protection because the Minister of Internal Security is against the whole idea. On top of which, we have a problem in this country that there are a lot of just lazy people who do not want to do their jobs, and this is especially prolific around the police. Make my job easier. I don't care what you do, just make my job easier. I mean, I'm sure this is common across all police districts. Like, nobody really wants to sit there and fight with somebody because the other guy has, the other guy really has a right to something, and he's trying to stand up for his rights, but it's going to cause me to have to go and, uh, and kick people out and drag them out and face protests and risk my own life because they could attack me at any second. All these things, the police don't really want to deal with it. So anything they can do to try and make the situation go away for a while, they'll do. They'll kick out, the smaller party, even if they're in the right. Um, whatever they have to do, they'll just close the case because who wants to bother with that case? It's too much trouble. You have that problem, um, and that's what's going on. The uh, So once again, nobody's being kicked out of a place that they own. That's absolutely never happening. Nobody is being kicked out of a place that they're paying rent for. Um, and they can't be kicked out, even if the owner decides, hey, I'd love to live in it myself. With the way the law is about evicting tenants, specifically in the 1967 areas of Jerusalem, that's not going to happen. These are cases that have gone through decades in the court, where the court, which is a left leaning court and always has been, has said, yeah, you know what? Like, we can't find an excuse on this one. Like, you're sitting there, you're not paying rent. We don't recognize that it's Palestine, and therefore you're a different country or something like that. That's ridiculous, and therefore you got to get out. But we're going to install it. We give the police permission, then we come back. Oh, wait a sec. Let's reconsider. Like I said, just inflames everything. Um, that's what's going on. I hope for the best there. I would have something to say on Ukraine or anything like that, but there really isn't anything to say. Israel is in no position to protect Ukraine, and the it's certainly not going to do that against what the U.S. is doing. And there's not really anything to talk about. Ukraine keeps begging for help, and we have to. I mean, it's a huge lesson for us to learn that there is never going to be an American soldier who ever sets foot in this country to help protect us. That's never going to happen. We could buy arms from them. They'll be, who doesn't like to sell arms, but it's never going to happen that, and it has happened where an American soldier, excluding like Jewish soldiers or even Christian soldiers who volunteered to come here, like outside of the army, former soldiers usually. I don't think there's ever been active. I don't think you could do that. You can't really abandon your post. So there's never been active duty soldiers under the American flag to come and protect us. That's not going to happen. What will happen is, threats, sanctions, maybe. Of course, we have the deal with Iran, so some people will just make a deal with the enemy. Um, but you see this in the 6 Day War. You see this, throughout the history. The best we can hope for are arms shipments and supplies, and not always then. I don't know what's going on with the U.S. in that capacity for Ukraine. My guess is, based on what I've seen in the news, not much, but it's not really my affair. One of the things that I pointed out in Facebook is that when I was 16, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and but by the time I was 17, um, they were the war started, and it was the first war since Vietnam. Nobody knew what was going to happen. Nobody knew if there was going to be a draft. The last war being Vietnam, there was a draft. Now, when I say war, of course, it was Vietnam was never officially declared and whatever. But not getting into that's a semantic issue. The I was I was like, I have no desire to liberate Kuwait. I don't think Kuwait deserves it. Plus, around that time, I saw a video of a congressional hearing where the Congress people asked whoever the person was. I don't. It was a long time ago. Um, what are our plans if Saddam invades Kuwait? And they said we have no plans to defend Kuwait. Saddam took that and other statements as a green light. The U.S. didn't care, so he invaded Kuwait. And I think if the U.S. wants to prevent countries from invading each other, then the least you should say is no. We plan to send troops, and we plan to stop this invasion if that's what you really mean. If you don't really mean that, like Biden said, we have no intention of fighting Russia. Okay, well, what else could Ukraine and Russia expect? Uh, you know, uh, this is a very big lesson, and it's a very big lesson also in when countries say things, you should listen to them. They are telling the truth. When people say things, you should listen to them. They're telling the truth. We should learn that about the Arabs. We keep trying to ascribe to the Arabs motives that they don't say they have. Um, and this one's becoming more moderate. Did they say that? If they didn't say that, then don't believe it, because unless they say it, And if they do say it, if they say, hey, we're going to kill you, you should believe them. All right, that's it for now. Shabbat Shalom from Israel, and have a good one.